Hi, my name is Hannah, and today we're interviewing Domenico. Originally from Italy, he is now based in Singapore. Domenico works with premium beauty brands entering the Asian market. Today he gives us his view on key trends that require our attention as we emerge into a post-pandemic world.
This podcast channel is about you. Successful international entrepreneurs. Successful expats. Successful investors. Sponsored by HCJ.tax.
Good morning, Domenico. How are you?
Fine. You?
Wonderful. Great to see you again. It's been such a long time since we've spoken. So please,
My pleasure.
could you introduce yourself to those who may be watching this video, listening to this podcast?
Yeah, sure. I am based in Singapore as a consultant specialist in the beauty industry. I am independent with my own company, and I work to facilitate the business development between companies from Europe and Southeast Asia. Of course, Southeast Asia starting from Singapore, that we consider as a hub of the trade.
Mm-hmm.
And especially I try to meet the cultural difference between Asia and Europe. So I work to make the business relationship smooth and facilitate the opportunities in both directions, from Europe to Singapore and from Singapore to Europe.
Okay, fantastic. So, obviously, in terms of sectors that have been performing really well in Asia, I think anyone I speak to has to put the beauty sector, the beauty industry, in their list of top performing sectors. So I appreciate that you have been on the cutting edge of what's been happening in Asia. So
Thank you.
with that in mind, what are your thoughts given what we're going through right now? Obviously, it's unprecedented. How do you see this affecting your business in particular and just business in general?
So my business in particular, travel retail and department store were a big share of the business of the beauty industry. But now, with this pandemic, travel retail already collapsed, and according to the indication of the aviation, we should reach the same level of passenger that we had in 2019 in 2023. So we should wait at least 3 years to see the things back to normal, if will be. So this is a big loss.
Wow.
Of course, accordingly, also department store, because the tourism was a big part of the shoppers that go in travel retail, in department stores. Especially in Singapore, the big department store relies on Chinese consumers coming in Singapore for shopping.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another, question mark how department store will recover in the future. The segment that I see that can still grow is the pharmacy. Pharmacy, first, because in case of lockdown, they are still open. And in my opinion, as you described in your book, maybe in the future we will have other lockdowns according to the so-called pandemic. We don't know if there will be real pandemic or they just will drive the pandemic. Then pharmacy will still open. Then there is the concern of the people for safety and hygiene that will drive the consumers in the pharmacy and they are more oriented to buy product sold in pharmacy. So more than it's a matter of a trust
Mm-hmm.
in the segment, and of course the online commerce that is booming because people with these measures of social distance are more willing to buy from online rather than going around for shopping.
Mm.
Uh, and after months of a stay at home, maybe also our behavior change. We are more, willing to spend time at home in family. Maybe try to learn something online, how to adapt for the future.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we really in the future don't need anymore to go around for shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, anyway, this is my vision regarding my sector, but I think more or less uh, will be the same for other retailer product, also for fashion or for uh, other luxury goods. I mean,
Mm.
so this is my point of view.
Okay. So my idea, my thesis has been that the pandemic hasn't necessarily created anything new, but what it has done would be to accelerate pre-existing trends. So here in the
Yeah,
US, for example, online shopping was on the rise before the pandemic. Shopping malls were closing down, large department stores were struggling, and the pandemic just made it worse for them. Made it worse for the retail sector. Of course, we heard about JCPenney, some other retail. So I think Nordstrom filed for bankruptcy as well. But on the other side, I've been seeing some news reports about Amazon, and like Amazon has so much demand. At least they did at one point a few weeks ago, that they actually cut their online advertising because they were having so much traffic. It was like more traffic on their website than they can handle. So they were
yeah.
almost like not encouraging customers. So what a problem to have, right? So my question is, in terms of Asia, do you see the online retail the online retail platform or channel, sales channel, compensating for the decline in traffic in physical stores?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
But even because in Singapore the operating costs are too high.
Yeah.
So for retailer, it's very, very difficult to make the business sustainable.
Mhm.
They were already at limit, and I think many were already in loss. But uh, talking about the big brands that they are worldwide, maybe they decide to maintain open Singapore even if they lose something because give the visibility. But in this case, where the visibility also is declining because the flow of tourists and business travel will be very, very low for the future, some brands are considering to quit Singapore because the loss is not compensated anymore from the visibility. Indeed, I saw some brands that they are already moving and they are closing. But I would expect in the future that others will take this decision.
Okay. So I guess, you know, I would imagine that if I had like a high-end luxury brand, then maybe Singapore makes sense because uh, the margins will be high enough to make it worth
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Whereas if I had like a mid-market sort of brand, yeah, definitely not.
no,
And what about Singapore in general? We were talking offline before we started recording about the way Singapore handled the lockdown and the fact that some long-term residents have been denied access. What
yes. This, I think that long-term residents that facing this denying of access
Hmm.
to their residences and also in the same time their business, they will take in consideration for the future how Singapore treated them. I have some other consultant that they have clients that actually they are stuck in Europe, but they have a business here with employees, and they are having big problems in managing their business, their employees. So, in long term, I think these people, this company will take a decision whether is the case to remain in Singapore or move in another country. Or also because now, as you said, the process is accelerated. Now, in few months, we see what could have happened in 4 or 5 years. So is easier now to manage everything in remote way.
Yeah.
Also the conference, the call. So maybe for some business there is no anymore needs to have any subsidiary open in Singapore.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
So yeah. So that was a point that someone else I was speaking to was making, that Singapore has, over the past, let's say, decade or so, become less international and more Asian in terms of
yeah,
the expat uh, portion of the population. Historically, it's been,
yeah.
people from all over the world, but now it's expats from elsewhere in Asia. So, if that be the case, in terms of Western expats, in terms of Western businesses, do you see them shifting to another Asian city, or would they just operate remotely out of Europe, out of Australia, out of North America? What are your thoughts?
It's difficult to say because actually I don't see another suitable Asian city that can replace Singapore.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe what I think is that any entity that they have physical incorporated in Singapore,
Hmm.
they maybe can close, but they can appoint some local uh, professional people that can manage the operation in the region.
Hmm.
Indeed, one of my service is to be local representative for the brands in European brands. So in this case, they don't need to travel often in Asia. They don't need to open any office, uh, even because the long haul travel will be very difficult to manage like in past.
Hmm.
But maybe the regional travel we can still manage in a short time quite well. But maybe the long haul will be more difficult. So it's not possible that now an export manager can fly from Europe in Asia and in 7 days can make the round of Asia visiting the clients. No, not
Hmm.
possible anymore. So I think that they will delocalize their human resource to care their business in the region. This is the best way, in my opinion. Then I don't know if
Hmm.
the company can think in this way, but this is the best solution. Also cost effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So some people have argued that there's a rising tide of economic nationalism. So, that's why we have Brexit. That's why we have President
Yeah.
Trump in the U.S. and so on. So, do you see that nationalistic push yourself? And if so, do you see it as being temporary? or do you see it as a longer term trend?
But this kind of a trend, I think, is not temporary.
Mm,
It will be long term because it's a long wave. And I think that the cycle could be 10 years.
mm,
But we see that this kind of trend in the past,
mm,
uh, inevitably they drove to war conflict. So I would hope that in this case is not this way. Of course, it will be not in short term, but
mm,
in decades. But the way is that I don't see any possibility unless the new generation, the so-called the Z generation, that they are really completely disconnected, that they are more ethical, more minimalist. They may change the world.
mm. Yeah, I'm. It's interesting that you say that. I've been like when in my book, I actually wanted to write that, but I was afraid that it would just come across very negative. But you're right. I mean, if it's one thing,
According to the story, is
yeah,
this: if we won't see our past,
yeah.
but
I mean, in high school, one of my favorite subjects was history, and my teacher always says, those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it, and that's where it appears that we found ourselves that we're repeating the same mistakes that led
yeah,
to previous conflicts, the Second World War, uh,
yeah,
trade barriers, nationalism, putting the motherland or the home country first, and part of what we tried to do in the post World War II period was to try to build bridges. We had what became the European Union, we had NATO, we had the United Nations, we had the WTO, we had the whole, Bretton Woods Agreement, Washington Consensus was about bringing us together so that it would not happen again. But here we are. So on that side, we see, on one hand, we see rising tide of nationalism, which could work out badly. But on the other hand, people, I've spoken to people who argue, yes, we have nationalism, but look at the young people, as you said, look at the millennials. They're online, they're part of a global culture. And so the outcome is not yet written. It could work out that thanks to what the younger people have experienced, how they were raised, their perspectives, maybe they would be part of a push towards perhaps not all the way back to globalization as we had it before, but a more sensible centrist view between nationalism on one side and extreme globalization on the other, because there was a pushback for a reason. This pushback was because globalization unfortunately was leading to greater income inequality, both among within a country and between and among nations as well. So the pushback was with good reason, but I think we're just swinging completely to the other side, which has consequences.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And then there is another point of view
Mhm.
that we grow the generation from 1960 and above. Uh, we grow in a very peaceful time,
Yeah.
and we were really open to discover the world.
Mhm.
So our attitude drove the process of globalization. I remember I started to travel just buy the flight ticket, and then when reach the destination, you look around
Yeah.
where you can find an hotel or something, because we didn't have any other information except the Lonely Planet. And
Yeah.
then was really, the challenge to discover, and that was our attitude. But now these young people, I mean those born from 2000, they live in a world where many conflict in terms of relationship, concern, uh, fear. So they are really very close. They stay in their room, connected with the device,
Yeah.
and that is their world. So they are not really open to exchange relationship with the other.
Mm-hmm.
So from one side, they are minimalist, they are quite peaceful, but their concern to discover the world maybe will not, you know, drive the world to come back as we were in the past.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
They are digital, and they are willing to accept any form of digital control. They are not really interested to become entrepreneurs or making money uh, or traders. They just are digital, and they want to live with the minimum to survive.
Mm-hmm.
This is my point of view. I'm referring to the majority. Of course, there is still a niche of this generation that maybe because the education in the family is different, they will be the leader.
Mm. Okay, that's a fair point. Although I can see that technology has opened their eyes. You know, they they follow YouTubers from all over the world. They're jumping onto Twitch or TikTok, and they form
Yeah,
communities that cross boundaries of nation and color and nation. You know, religion. You know, so in a way, technology has helped bring us together. But I get what you're saying. At the same time, to the extent that someone spent all their waking hours focusing on a device, that's less time they're actually interacting face to face with someone uh, who may be different from them, who may have had different experiences from them. So I see what you're saying. Now let's look at Europe. Given, I mean, we've spoken very generally, but what are your thoughts as to what's happening in Europe right now?
Europe is a very complicated situation because the project of European Union started to avoid another conflict in Europe because the country in Europe always fight with each other. But even under European Union, they still fight between them.
Hmm.
So now I see that with this pandemic, the European Central Bank really put a lot of money, much more than they announced in March. So maybe in this way, something will change in Europe and that there will be more balance. And maybe the high level of debt of some countries will be not anymore an issue
Hmm.
because we should think that we should adapt to accept high level of debt for the countries, not austerity anymore, because that was the main problem in Europe, that Germany drove this policy of austerity, and it's very difficult to find a common point in so big area with a lot of difference from Scandinavian to Mediterranean area.
Hmm.
The middle point is difficult to find. I think that Europe still have a good chance to recover uh, because it's in terms of consumers culture is really strong, but it depends how they want manage uh, the European Union. So far, we as European, we are not so happy because the too many issues, and too a waste of time to take decision, while the other countries like US take action immediately.
Hmm.
The European Union is always late. However, there are some countries that are really smart, as you addressed in your book, the Portugal. Portugal recovered from the crisis of 2008 very, very good.
Yeah. Hmm.
Uh, Also Spain, but I mean Portugal maybe because it's small, uh, they are more flexible to adapt.
Hmm. Mm. So, yeah, I'm listening to you speak, and I'm imagining the push towards economic nationalism in a different way. So, yes, Europe, I don't think at this point, I mean, things can change, but at this point, I don't see Europe recovering from the departure of the UK at the end of this year. I think it'll be
No,
changed. And the way in which, yes, you mentioned that, this European Central Bank, the ECB, did respond positively in terms of stimulus to some extent. But on the flip side, there was no common approach to handling the pandemic, and European countries, even closed borders to each other.
yeah, yeah,
So,
it
again,
is,
it just shows how fractured the European project is at this point, how damaged it is. So, on the tail end of this year, once Brexit is formalized, I see a Europe that is not as cohesive as it once was, nor does it want to head in that direction, because once upon a time it was trying to harmonize. I mean, it harmonized currency, but they were trying to harmonize uh, politics as well. You know,
yeah,
trying, yeah, but somehow I don't see that happening. Whereas on the flip side, within the Anglo-Saxon world, I see a coherence in response and policy from the what we call the Five Eyes nation. So the U.S., Canada, the U.K., Australia, New Zealand. So
yeah,
most recently, how they responded and held China responsible for negligence at the beginning of the pandemic. So it seems as if there's a greater coming together of those five nations. But in terms of the rest of, the EU, not so much. ASEAN, not so much. The major trade, Mercosur, Latin American bloc trading blocs, not so much. African Union, not so much. Now that Libya is out of it, so it does seem as if, yes, we're going to have the continued rising of nationalism, but at the same time, the Anglo-Saxon world is consolidating its strength and consolidating its power. And unfortunately, we have this standoff against China right now, not just in terms of the trade war, but in terms of China, you know, to some extent retaliating against other countries. So, for example, Australia, discouraging Chinese students from going to Australia, and so on and so forth. What do you think is the outcome of that? Do you think that this somewhat of a cold war or trade war would intensify towards a hot war?
um, I really don't know how to say because it's difficult to foresee.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay. So so let's move away from the geopolitics, although I find it interesting. Just go back to just business. So Western businesses, European businesses, they, in terms of those who are looking to explore the Asian market, you're saying that they can still do so, but they just need to be conscious of the new restrictions we find ourselves with. They need to find local partners. They need to understand that they can't. You can't send an export manager from Europe and he'll be able to travel around. They'll have to localize their strategy a lot more. What are the guide whatever what are the words of guidance you'd have for European business or Western business trying to expand into Asia?
I see, as I told you in
The beginning.
before, that the best way to expand the business and also control the business for the companies that are already in Asia, and they need to, you know, maintain their business and also grow their business. They have to appoint local representative all people that can manage the operation.
Mhm.
Because will be not anymore easy like in past to go up and down,
Mhm.
and maybe now the control on the territory is must be more constant, not like in past that just with one round of travel per year or 2 times they can cover the region,
Mhm.
because now the business need more attention to keep the sustainability. And of course, the logistic problems in traveling, and maybe also the safety for to clear the custom and to
Mhm.
clear the immigration for the people traveling will be an issue.
Yeah.
So this is my point of view. But anyway, I see that the European companies are still looking to expand their business overseas.
Mhm.
I just participated to an international exhibition, Cosmoprof, that was scheduled in March. They canceled, but this week they launched the digital uh, exhibition, and really was really interesting because we have had a lot of meeting, a lot of company still keep going, also willing to invest and waiting for the good time. So on this side of business, I see positivity.
Right. Okay. So this.
Companies are really positive and willing to wait for the good time.
Okay. So, on that note, let's close it there on a positive note. The appetite for expansion and investment and doing business is still there. It's just that we need to adapt the way in which we do business.
Yeah, yeah,
That's it. Simple.
exactly, exactly. It is the business is still business. You just we have to adapt and try to understand the future opportunity.
Hmm. Okay. Domenico, thank you for your